Today, I will take you to count the 10 extremely cruel tortures in history, each of which broke the limit of human endurance, and made people die miserably in bloody despair. Which top 10 criminal punishment are on the list? How perverted are the means? Number 10. Hanging. Although hanging is still used in the French Foreign Legion to this day, in fact, the popular hanging is now illegal in any country. In fact, hanging is strangulation to suffocate people to death. It can also be used to strangle people's necks. Hanging was once used in Spain until it became illegal in Spain after the abolition of the death penalty in 1978. Hanging usually involves the prisoner being trapped in a chair, and then the executor wraps a metal bar around the prisoner's neck and tightens it slowly until the prisoner dies. In hangings in some places, a nail is usually attached to the metal bar so that the nail can be inserted into the prisoner's spine when the prisoner is strangled. During the execution of the hanging, the prisoner may convulse due to the extreme pain until he dies. The most extreme version of all hangings is that used by the Catalans in Spain. Hanging was last used by José Luis Serveto in 1977. Andorra was the last country in the world to abolish the hanging, officially abolishing it in 1990. However, according to Parikh, an Indian author and legal expert, hangings are still very common in India. All countries in the world have executed criminals by hanging. In most cases, those who were hanged were common people. Beheading was often used by nobles, so the use of hanging was regarded as a symbol of disgrace. As for the war criminals who participated in the Second World War, many of them were hanged because of their heinous crimes. In Chinese history, hanging is usually not the lowest form of death penalty. On the contrary, in order to preserve the whole body, high-ranking officials and royal families usually demanded death by hanging, rather than beheading, which may result in decapitation. Shoot more now. Britain once used hanging as the first step of its split sentence, and the prisoner would not die during this stage. Number 9. Ship torture. Ship torture is a kind of torture in ancient Persia. It is designed to slowly torture people to death. In the boat sentence, the prisoner's back will be tied to the boat, and his hands, feet and head will be in the air. The prisoner will be asked to drink milk and honey, and then sent to an area with a high incidence of dysentery. Then the prisoner's body will be covered with honey and milk, so that insects can be attracted to him. The prisoner then floats in a stagnant pond, exposed to the sun. At this time, the prisoners who have no ability to resist can only let their excrement accumulate in the boat, and more of them will crawl on him, and these insects will eat his flesh and suck his blood. Every day, the prisoners will be re-fed and smeared with honey for milk, so as to ensure that the prisoners will not die of dehydration and starvation, but will be tortured to death slowly. However, most ordinary prisoners will still die of starvation, dehydration and shock-type sepsis. Usually a few days after the execution of the boat sentence, the prisoner will become insane. Boat punishment is very painful, humiliating and tormenting. Plutarch, Greek historian, wrote that Mithridates died on the 17th day after being executed. The Native American Indians used a similar execution, tying the prisoner to a tree, smearing him with dirt, and leaving him to the ants. Because the prisoners had not been force-fed previously, they usually starved to death after a few days. Number 8. Skinning. As the name suggests, skinning is to peel off the skin of a person. The process of skinning is like skinning an animal for gratification or fur. Skinning is often used to torture and punish prisoners. We can tell whether a prisoner is being tortured or executed by how much skin is peeled off. Skinning is an ancient punishment that was used by the Assyrians and the Ming dynasty. Skinning is scary when you hear it, and its cruelty is no less than that of Ling Kai. This punishment is not among the officially prescribed methods of execution by capital punishment. But it has indeed been used many times in history and has been recorded in historical records. When peeling, the knife is cut from the spine, and the back skin is divided into two halves with one knife, and the skin and muscles are slowly separated with the knife, tearing apart like a butterfly spreading its wings. The most difficult thing is fat people, because there is still a pile of fat between the skin and muscles, which is not easy to separate. There is another peeling method, the reliability of which is unknown. The method is to bury the person in the soil with only one head exposed, cut across with a knife on the top of the head, pull the scalp away, and pour mercury into it. Due to the high specific gravity of mercury, it will pull the muscles and skin apart. People buried in the soil will writhe in pain and cannot break free. Finally, The body will crawl out, naked, from the top of the head, leaving only a body. The skin was left in the soil, and after the skin was peeled off, 2 drums were made, which were hung at the gate as a warning to the enemy. The earliest skinning was done after death, and later developed into a live skinning. Number 7. Cutting meat, lingqi. Cutting meat is also called lingqi. Ling kai is usually used on criminals who have committed serious crimes, such as collaborating with the enemy and treason, murdering parents, etc. Ling kai has many different names in different places. Ling kai is actually a punishment that China began to use in 900 AD and was not abolished until 1905. Usually the prisoner will be tied to a pillar in a public place, and then the flesh of the prisoner will be cut off piece by piece. As for how to do it, there is no record in ancient documents, so the specific implementation process of Ling kai is different in different places. Later, anesthesia was used during the Lingling process. Perhaps it was kindness to the prisoner or just to prevent the prisoner from passing out during the Lingling process. Ling kai mainly punished the prisoners in 3 aspects. First, the psychological humiliation of the prisoners because they had to be displayed in public places. Second, the physical torture of the patients. And finally, the humiliation of the patients after death. In some cases of skinning, the prisoner is also dismembered, such as cutting, tearing, pulling, chopping and other methods of separating the prisoner's body. Ling kai, which is what the folks call 1,000 cuts. Ling kai punishment first appeared in the 5 dynasties period, and it was officially designated as a punishment in the Liao dynasty. Since then, Jin, Yuan, Ming, and Qing have all stipulated it as a statutory punishment, and it is the cruelest form of death penalty. A total of 36,000 knives is needed, and the criminal must be executed with the last knives to be considered a successful execution. Number 6. Wheel punishment. Wheel punishment, also known as the Catherine wheel, was used to deal with extremely bad criminals in medieval and early modern society. Wheel punishment was used until the 18th century. In France, Germany, Denmark, Switzerland, Romania, Russia, the United States and some other countries at that time, torture by wheel was always used as a harsh criminal law. The wheels used in the wheel punishment are the wheels on the ordinary carriage, and the wheels have a projective structure, but sometimes it is not necessary to use wheels in the wheel punishment. Sometimes the prisoner was lying on the wheel and was beaten with an iron rod, so that the prisoner could be nailed to the wheel. Alternatively, the prisoner will be required to lie on 2 St. Andrew's crosses made up of 2 wooden beams arranged in an X shape. And then the prisoner's crushed body will be put on the wheel for publicity. Second only to hanging cages, wheel punishment was the most common form of punishment in Germany during the Middle Ages. When it comes to punishing prisoners on death row, few forms of torture are as prevalent as the wheel. First, the victim, usually naked, is bound to the ground with his limbs apart. However, wooden spokes correspond to major joints such as wrists, ankles, knees, hips and shoulders. The executioner broke limbs and joints with heavy iron-clad wheels. However, this is only the beginning of the nightmare. After the bones of the limbs are broken separately and mixed with blood and flesh into a soft state, the limbs are woven onto the spokes of the wheel, and then hung upside down for display. The tortured victims will continue to maintain this state for several days. While being insulted and humiliated by others, they will die slowly while dying. When he or she dies, it becomes a feast for crows and insects. Number 5. Tongnu, copper bull. The copper bull, also known as the Sicilian bull, is a punishment method invented in ancient Greece. An Athenian inventor of brass named Perillos promised the emperor of Arachga in Sicily that he had invented a new method of punishment. He first cast a model of a bull entirely in brass, with a hollow body and a small door in the bull. The prisoner was locked in the body of the bull, and then a fire was burned under the bull's body. The fire gradually burned the brass cow to a red color and cooked the prisoner alive. Due to the special structure of copper bull, the smoke will come out like aromatherapy. The cow's head is equipped with a structure composed of pipes and plugs. This structure can make the voice of the prisoner screaming in the cow's body sound like an angry cow. There are even rumors that when the door on the cow is opened and the body of the prisoner is taken out, there will be some unburned bones, which look like jewelry, and these bones will then be used as handcuffs. Number 4. Caesarean section. Laparotomy or liver extraction refers to removing part or all of important organs from the abdomen. As a kind of death penalty, this punishment must be destructive. Caesarean section is a very cruel death penalty in history. Generally speaking, the last organ taken out is the heart or kidney. In Japan, caesarean section was once used as a method of death penalty and part of suicide rituals. Number 3. Cooking punishment. The people who are cooked will be put in a big vat. Cooking was first used in Russia and Europe 3,000 years ago. In the cooking punishment in those places, they use oil, acid, water. This process is very slow and painful. Usually, the large pots used in cooking are filled with water, oil, tar, grease, and even dissolved lead. Sometimes the prisoner was immersed in these liquids, which were then slowly heated, and sometimes the prisoner was placed directly into the already boiling water, usually with the prisoner's head in first. Then the executors would use hooks to dip the prisoners deeper, so that their deaths could be hastened. Or you can use a shallower container filled with oil and resin to hasten the death of the prisoner. Prisoners will be gradually immersed in water and slowly boiled to death. Number 2. Impalement. Compared with the above method, the next method can be said to be the most painful but also the most interesting one. Impaling is when a person is impaled on a stake. It can pass through the side of the body, rectum, vagina, or mouth. This method of death is indeed very painful, because it will last for several days. Usually the stakes would be erected on the ground, and the person who was put on them would hang in the air until they died. Sometimes the stakes were inserted into the ground to prevent the immediate death of the prisoner, and at the same time the stakes were used to plug the patient's wound to prevent blood from flowing out. After the public display, the prisoner is penetrated with a blunt instrument through the perineum and rectum. The blunt instrument would push the prisoner's organs aside, which would prevent his immediate death. The blunt instrument would then come out of the chest cavity and into the top of the body, preventing the prisoner from falling off the post. The prisoner is usually threaded on the pillar in this way until he slowly falls to the ground due to gravity and his own needle stick. Empires that have used this method are the Assyrian Empire, the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire. A sharpened wooden stake is used to stand in the soil, and the victim sits on the tip, and the long stick is inserted through the victim's anus, and passes through the mouth or chest. Number 1. Divide the body by 5 horses. In medieval England, the people who would be quartered by 5 horses were usually the renegades. Quartering was legal until Britain abolished treason in 1814. This is a very shameful and terrible way of death, usually only for committing the highest crime such as treason. 5 horses will only be used on men. Women who committed treason were tied to a stake and burned at the stake. It was not until 1970 that it was changed to hanging. Mortals would first be tied up in public, then hanged and mutilated, and finally quartered, in some famous public mutilations where anyone who didn't look would be suspected of being a potential traitor. Dividing the body by 5 horses is also a kind of torture in ancient China. 5 horses or oxen are used to tear apart the head and limbs of a person, and the person pulled is a living person. Also known as 5 car cracks. The post metaphor divides the complete thing into very fragments. It takes a lot of effort to cut off a person's head and limbs, let alone pulling them. And the pain suffered by the prisoners is even more conceivable. When it's time to tear it apart, I'm afraid the victim won't feel the pain anymore. The pain is when it is being pulled. That's a wrap for this video. Which of these torture methods looks the scariest to you? Is there any other cruel torture or punishment in the human history you would like to share? Leave a comment below. If you want to watch more videos to satisfy your curiosities or morbid curiosities, please like, share and subscribe. Until next time, see you on the next top amazing video.